Welcome to Pieces for My Puzzle. I am your host, Nikki Ship, and I'm excited to be sharing with you my life with a son on the spectrum. This podcast is for anyone who is looking for quick tips and perspective, but most of all, for hope and inspiration. So sit back, relax, and let's put the pieces together. Hello and welcome back to another episode of Pieces from My Puzzle. I am your puzzle master, Nikki. Thanks so much for joining us today. Last week we spoke with the fabulous Katie, Barrie, and she's here again today for part 2 of our show. We spoke about her son and working through a diagnosis the last episode. So if you didn't check that one out, please do today. And we're going to actually today talk about finding resources and what it's meant for Katie and her family to find the resources that she needs. So without further ado, I guess we'll just jump right in.
Let's do it.
Yeah, thanks for being back. All right, so tell everyone listening a little bit about navigating through resources. We talked last week about, you get the diagnosis, you're dealing with all of these emotions, you're just trying to figure out, and you kind of went into this mode of just what do we need to do? Right. So talk a little bit about that.
So, well, the first thing was to reach out to the school because we thought, okay, we have this diagnosis, we need to get an IEP underway.
Yeah. And he was in kindergarten.
He was going into, this was the fall before first grade.
Okay.
And so per your recommendation, I had sent that email to the powers that be and said, here's the thing, we have a diagnosis, can we get an IEP? And I had no clue what that meant, what it looked like, an IEP versus a 504.
Yeah.
I kept calling it a 405. I was a mess. I didn't know what I was talking about. I just knew this is what we needed now. And then the recommendation of an advocate had come up, and I know you had spoke so highly of yours, and just due to timing issues, it didn't necessarily work out. But a random neighbor who I'm not necessarily friends with, but somehow our paths had crossed, and she said, oh, well, I know so-and-so used this person as an advocate, and I reached out to this woman, and she ended up being saving grace to everything.
I love divine timing.
Oh, my gosh. It truly was. While it was the hardest year you could ever imagine, things really did fall into place as they were supposed to, and the right people just kind of were there right when we needed them. But having an advocate, oh my goodness, I can't stress that enough. Somebody who knows the system, may be familiar with a particular school district, who can literally walk and guide you through every step of the way of what to do. I don't know how we would have done it without her. I would have hired you to just tell us what to do. I'm like, gosh, if this podcast was around 4 years ago, what a help, what a tremendous help. But
so was it difficult to acquire the IEP at first?
Yes. It was the hardest part of the journey. So luckily, this advocate that we got hooked up with, she was very familiar with our school, the district, the school. She knew how the politics and all the ins and outs worked, which is a huge plus. And the school psychologist at the time, she took a look at Gregor's diagnosis. We had 18 pages, I think, front, back. And she said, no, he's fine. He doesn't need an IEP. Maybe we could put together a 504 and he'll be fine. But he's okay. And she wanted to just put these little Band-Aids in place to almost keep him busy. Like, oh, we'll put a bouncer on his seat. Or, oh, we'll, just fidgeting was the issue. Or something. Completely dismissing.
And did you encounter this? Because I've encountered this before with Drayson. This is why I'm kind of interjecting and asking this question. But, Drayson looks like a quote-unquote normal boy.
Absolutely.
And so a lot of times we were getting the, oh, well, it's not that big of a deal. Like you said, the Band-Aid to the issue kind of thing.
And not even just at school, but in general. People go, I would have never have guessed.
Right.
And then all of a sudden he'll start stemming and they're
Right.
like, well, what's going on? You know? And so I think that there's this misconception, and what I have noticed within education is that not everybody is trained in autism.
Most of them aren't.
Right. And so that was a big concern for me, because then they, like you said, so that, was that a concern for you at this point, that maybe she just wasn't aware or hadn't had a proper training or something to that effect? Because, I mean, in my opinion, and we've talked about this on the show before, folks, the difference between a 504 and an IEP, and why it's so important to get that IEP implemented over a 504 in one of my previous podcast episodes. And I think that that's so important to identify, because a lot of times as parents, we think that we're being told the best recommendation for our child from that educator.
Oh, yeah.
And so
This is a real hot one for me. I get real fired up because, oh my gosh, I was ready to go to the mat with somebody.
You're right.
But yeah, you're exactly right. So in the meantime, we had this 504 in place, which was, a few little things in the classroom. Again, our teacher going into that year was an angel and did everything she possibly could to work with Gregor and to work with us to get through this
and that's hard to watch too, because for the educators in the classroom, they are limited. They have their own set of limitations.
Yes.
So you're asking for these things and you're trying to push for these things, and it has to come from, the powers that be, not necessarily the teacher.
Yes. And the powers that be were not helping, shall we say.
Did they try to keep you at the 504?
Yes.
Okay.
The school psychologist thought the 504 was enough. She really downplayed the diagnosis, made it sound like it was no big deal. It was absolutely infuriating. This woman would talk to me and address everything as if we were in the wrong. We didn't know. It was not as big of a deal as we thought it would, or thought it was. And we knew it was. Like I said, our doctor who did the diagnosis, she really informed us about certain things we needed to look for. The importance of the IEP, the importance of several things that needed to be in place to support him further down the road.
Right.
And
to set him up for that success.
To set him up for that success.
What's happening right now doesn't seem like a big deal, but 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the road.
Yep, that was exactly.
And how
the
do you make up
concern.
for that time if you
Right.
don't act, if you don't do it?
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. And so we weren't going to be okay with the 504. That was not enough. We knew he needed more. And that's when the fight began. That's where we kept coming back and challenging everything that was getting thrown back at us, because we knew that he needed more, he deserved more, and there was no reason that he wasn't getting an IEP. I mean...
And in the meantime, trying not to feel like you're going batshit crazy.
Right.
Because you're relentless and pushing for these things, and now you're wondering, like, am I...
Right. Am I imagining this? Am I pushing for something that isn't necessarily appropriate for him?
Yeah.
But
am I being unreasonable? But we
weren't.
Yeah.
I knew that we weren't. Just per conversations with you, with the doctor, I knew that it wasn't over the top what we were asking for. And this went on. So I started reaching out, trying to get an IEP scheduled, a meeting before school even started, first part of July. I think our first meeting to even discuss a 504 was late September, October, before they'd even set anything up. And it was from September to April, up until spring break, fighting back and forth about, you need to take another look, he needs an IEP, they kept denying us. And finally, we went up the food chain. We thought, this is bullshit. We know he needs more. They are just wanting to shove it under the rug, not create more paperwork, not address the problem.
Not have to do additional work.
Oh my God. It was so infuriating. And So we went to the district and we figured out who we needed to talk to going on up. And we were going to go as high as we needed to go. We would get attorneys involved, do whatever we needed to do, because that's the point that you realize that not every educator, not everybody working in the school system, let me say that, has your child's best interest in mind.
Right.
Unfortunately, it was one of the saddest realities to really wrap my brain around, but it's like, you don't really care what's great for him, what's best for him. You care about dollars, you care about time and paperwork, and that, like, it was abundantly clear that that was the main priority, not what was best for the child.
So when you start seeing the business side of education and the logistics that are involved.
Exactly. And that, I think, fueled the fire even more, made us more just determined. And frankly, it's like, fuck you. We're going to get this done. He is going to get the support that he needs. And you're not going to tell us what's best for our child.
Right.
And so we went up the food chain with the district, and we finally got a lady. She was the basically head of school psychologist for the entire district. And she basically had to come in and do the school psychologist job for her because she wasn't doing her job. She came in and she sat in on this meeting to reassess. Was it an MET meeting? MET 2?
Right, yeah.
I don't even know. It was such a blur. But she came in. She took one look at his diagnosis and what was happening in the classroom.
Right.
It was an open and shut case. She just looked at it. She's like, what are we even doing here? He absolutely is the category 1. Needs to have an IEP. It was so simple. It was right there the whole time. And this woman just came in, and I'll never forget, this was April, mind you. It took from September to April to get somebody to listen, to come in, to pay attention to what we were saying. So
almost the whole entire school year
was lost.
It was lost.
It was lost.
Wow.
And I'll never forget.
Such a fundamental age, too.
Yes.
Like such a core, fundamental, foundational age within their education.
Yeah, and I'll never forget sitting in that meeting when she signed off on this. I just lost it.
Oh, I would.
I was so emotional. I mean, I felt like we had just conquered the world, like we'd been fighting so hard for this for really over a year, because this had started spring of the following year. All of the heartache and the stress. Finally,
and the anger.
We were being
heard.
The
anger. I remember when we were going through something similar with Drayson at the previous school that he was at before the one he's at now. It's very similar. I mean, asking and, feeling like you're almost being ignored.
Yes.
And then when I was asking even for the validation on some of his goals, like where's the data, they couldn't even produce it. It became so apparent how bad it was.
Shuffled along.
And I remember when we finally got that part of his educational career settled and got him to this other school, I remember crying. And I remember almost weeping because those 2.5 years that we were trying to get this all sorted out, at this point, he's now 8, and I can't get any of that time back.
Yep.
And that is what just shook me to my core for him. Like, I remember, and I still, like you were saying, like, this is the subject, folks, that, like, lights me up like a Christmas tree.
Man.
Because I can't stand the fact that we lost that much time because I was trying to be an advocate for my son.
The expletives may fly.
Right, yeah.
Oh, man.
I mean,
it ignites that, like, inner mama beast mode.
It does.
When you come to the realization of what's really going on. And I feel like, as parents, we don't know what we don't know, especially if you're a special needs parent that's maybe new to this whole world, newly diagnosed child. You have no idea what your kid's rights are.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like a whole new world, and it's very overwhelming. But once you realize what's happening when they pull back the curtain,
Right.
Oh my God. It is just
Right. It's mind-blowing. It's mind-blowing.
And so
and it's
infuriating.
upsetting.
It'll make
and
the blood boil.
I felt so betrayed. I remember because I had personal talks with the principal. I had personal talks with the head of special education, and they were sitting there looking at me dead in the eye, like that they were completely. And I remember so vividly. The principal said to me, "Oh, Mrs. Shipp, please don't worry. We're Team Drayson." No, you're fucking not. Like, you're not. And I felt like I was being lied to straight to my face. And the amount of deception that you then feel, it's hard not to go into that mode. And I remember that very vividly. And we ended up taking it as far as hiring a special needs attorney. And you know that story.
Yep.
And I remember coming home and bawling, feeling helpless, feeling like I was trying to help my kid and no one was helping me in the direction that I needed to go. Mm-hmm. And I felt helpless. And I remember saying to Pat, and I think I was even probably grabbing a bottle of wine. No joke, not an exaggeration. I was headed straight for the red wine that night. And I remember I said to him, I don't understand why this has to be so hard. I don't understand why these are answers that could be supplied to me that they can't even answer simple questions.
Right.
And I remember
they don't know. It makes you wonder, like, do they even know how to handle this?
When you're sitting in a room like that, too, and there's a team of people, and they're all exchanging looks across the table, but no one is still answering you, it's fucking infuriating.
I'll never forget. The answer for why he didn't need an IEP, because his grades are good. He doesn't need an IEP. His grades are good. I'm like, what the hell do his grades have to do?
Right. Because then they look at just the academic part of it.
They just looked at that part of it. And it's like, okay, but he's a first grader.
But not right now. Like, I don't expect first grade to be that hard.
It's like one didn't even relate to the other. And that was the excuse they kept giving over and over and over.
Right.
And it was a brick wall that was put up that we weren't moving past.
And what's funny about that is that if you wait, like, and I've heard this from lots of other parents who have older kids on the spectrum, they realize by 5th or 6th grade, oh shit, I need an IEP.
Yeah.
Now the rationale to them is, well, they haven't needed an IEP.
Right.
Why do they need one now?
It's like, well,
and it's
dummy,
just,
this is what we were trying to tell you.
Right. And so then again, I would feel like I was going crazy.
Yeah.
I would feel like I was going completely crazy and out of my mind.
Yeah. Oh, man. Yeah. Yes.
Katie might need a break.
So
now that I got you all riled up.
Truly, though, like that moment that the woman who truly did have his best interest in mind and knew, like, we're not screwing around here either. Like, he needs an IEP, get it done, sign off. It was just this wave of relief, like, oh my God, all this fighting, we're finally making headway. And she looked at me, she's like, why are you crying? I'm like, oh my gosh, like, we did it. Like, this has been such a weight.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't even describe it unless you experience it. And from that point on, we got the IEP in place. He was getting speech twice a week. But the measures it took to get to that point, it's just and it's unacceptable, really. It's unacceptable because had it not been for knowing your experience and the advocate that we had, I mean, I can't imagine. Oh, I'm sure tons of parents, and we've talked about this so many times, just think, well, they said he doesn't need one, so I guess they're fine. And, you know, they know what's best. Yeah. They're the educators. It's like, no, they don't.
Like, they haven't called me back yet.
Right.
Well fucking call them. Yeah.
Yes.
Like, I can get on the phone and call them then. Like, I think that that's hard because to be so assertive. Mm-hmm. And I've noticed that my beast modes are always when I'm in mom mode. It's funny what becoming a mother brings out in you, right?
Yeah.
Because before I might have been a little bit more timid or, you know, things like that. But it's funny when you become a mom how, like,
don't mess
with my cubs, man. Don't even. And I think that that's the hard part is that they're in this educational institution and you're like, okay, I'm trusting them. Right. You're trusting them with your child's education. And what I realized was, and this was the even harder part to realize, that they were inadvertently setting Drayson up for failure before he even got started.
Yep.
Before he even got started. So some of these fundamentals that I pushed so hard for with him and some of the strides we've made is because we have. If I hadn't, Drayson could potentially be that kid that grows up, cannot take care of himself, cannot, is deemed, incapable, and then becomes what? What happens when I go someday and Pat goes? Like, this kid is not going to be awarded to the state. This kid is not going to I don't want him to be institutionalized and not be able to live or to become independent. And that all streams in even within education. Like, I don't care if it's a basic skill that Drayson learns and he works in a grocery store and he's happy, or he works some basic, just basic level job, but he has something to do with the construct of that. Like,
is a contributing member to society.
But basic English, basic math, basic, all of these foundational things all tie into that because that is part of giving them the structure, at least in my opinion. I could be wrong, folks. I don't know everything, but I'm just saying that's how I've always felt, even before I even knew Drayson was autistic, right?
Yep.
So that you're combating all of these feelings and just trying to keep your shit level-headed, right? While you're having these conversations with let's say the educational team.
Yeah. And even beyond that though, like organizational skills, putting things in their place. I mean, and that was even more of what we were dealing with. It's like, oh my God, his desk would be a disaster and he wouldn't even know where to find things. And so teaching him those basic skills and teaching him the conversational skills with peers. There's so much more to it than the damn grades.
Right. Well, and that's the hard part, like I said, where I feel for the educators that are on the ground floor.
Right.
Because they're limited only with the resources that they're given.
And it's not their fault.
And they've got 26 other kids or however many they have, and they're trying to figure that out.
They need the support too.
Right. And so I think that I saw that too. I thought, wow, this is really sad because I think that there's a lot of teachers out there that want to do more, that can do more, but they're so limited on resources. And so, and I do realize that all of this costs money. I do realize that. But there, at the same time, like, I think that was also the other part that was infuriating for me too. I'm well aware of how many allocated dollars the district was receiving for my son to attend the school. And to know that these things weren't even being implemented and there was no proof to show it, that's where I got mad.
Dollars.
So when I started asking questions like, well, where is this money going? Or, like really looking on those higher level of things, I couldn't find the justification.
Right.
And that was really, really upsetting for me.
Well, I think we could both agree that they want you to stay in the dark. They don't want you asking questions because if you ask questions, there's a chance you may leave. And with your child goes the money. Goes the money.
And I sure did. I said bye-bye.
Same.
See you later. Gotta go. It's been fun.
But we too had been lied to.
Yes.
About the actions that were being taken and what was happening. We were being told information that was completely false.
Yeah.
And our advocate backed that up and said that's completely untrue about ABC or whatever it was. And it's a really hard pill to swallow knowing that these people who are caring for your child throughout the day, giving them their education, I mean, in some cases, spending more time with your child than you are, depending on what your situation is, that they can look at you and lie to you straight in the face, tell you they're doing something when it couldn't be farther from the truth. It is just
I remember one time
truth.
I was in an IEP meeting and I had a horribly embarrassing moment, but at the same time I was glad that it happened. I got so upset that I just started crying and screaming at the team. And I know I looked like I was psychotic, 100%. But I also felt like how many other meetings had I been sitting in where I've been trying to get this hashed out and you guys can't get your fucking shit together. Now I'm losing it. Now I'm done. And I remember saying that very vividly to the principal because I think that's who it was. She had interrupted me And they were not letting me finish my sentence. They were not letting me finish. I was talking about they had overlooked the fact that he had a BIP, that he had a behavioral plan in place. So when the advocate and I questioned on one of the meetings if the BIP was in place to help him with some of these behaviors, they were like, well, what are you talking about? He doesn't have a BIP. We're almost through an entire school year, and I realized in that moment that they had never been incorporating the BIP for the whole entire school year with the IEP. Never, not once. So the second we had to reappoint for another time because we had run out of time. So we reappoint for another time, and they started to go into their rationale. And I remember I was asking something, and I believe it was the principal that interrupted me. That's all it took. Yeah. I don't even remember what I said. I remember screaming. I remember telling him I was tired of their shit and that I was done, that I didn't want to do it I was like, I'm just done.
Yeah.
This needs to be corrected. I can't even believe how long this has been going on.
Yeah.
I am just done. And I had to take myself, we were on a Zoom call. I had to take myself off the camera. Poor Pat, my husband, didn't even know what to do with me because I was in hysterics. And they caught me at the right time, at the right moment.
Just hit, yeah.
And so then I just sat there sobbing. And then I got the same answer that I kept getting every time. Mrs. Shipp, we love Drayson. We're going to do everything we can to help Drayson. We're here for you. No, you're not. No, you are not. Because if you were, I wouldn't have to come back with you being afraid to call 911 to put me in an institution right now, because that's how I felt.
I'm laughing because I had that meeting. I had the meeting where they kept saying the thing about he doesn't need an IEP because his grades are good. Yeah. And it's like almost like they didn't think I understood English or something. Yeah. I was so frustrated
Speaking in a different
and
language,
angry.
yeah.
I, too, just lost it and started crying. And at this point, Scott, he's right there ready to go to bat with me.
Yeah.
He is a much more outgoing, assertive personality, shall we say, and he has no problem mincing words. And so when he gets fired up, he's going to let him have it. And he did. He totally took over and basically said, this is bullshit.
Yeah.
Get this done. We need to get this done.
Yeah.
And
I'm glad. Well, I commend you for being in the same room with them. I was on camera. I don't think I would have been able to be in the same
the best part, I think still that one of my favorite things is that through all of this, through all the MET meetings, the 1, the 2, all the dumb meetings, I call them dumb because I feel like it was just running around in circles, that school psychologist never came to a single meeting.
You are kidding me.
She was never. This is the woman. I used to call her the puppet master because it's like she was telling the speech pathologist and the resource teacher, I guess was her title at the time, kind of like what to do. But she herself would never show her face.
What a coward.
The speech pathologist ran one of the meetings one time. It's like, that's not her job. The person who should be handling all of this was never present once. Never present once. The principal was never present once. Assistant principal was there a couple times. But it was like it was all a big joke, and they were going through the motions. And unfortunately, we lost almost the entire first grade year because we finally got that IEP April going into spring break. And guess what? They didn't go back to school after that because of COVID.
Oh my God.
Go back to COVID. So we never even got to dive in with the IEP and all of the support.
Yeah, because the online school part was a joke.
Oh God, don't even. That was a nightmare.
That's a whole nother episode.
So it was so much time wasted when we just need to open your eyes. People just need to open their eyes, listen to what the parents are saying, take a look, and do what's best for the child.
Right. Right.
And
so that kind of leads me into my next question is, obviously, how important do you feel that it is to find resources for your son and even for you guys as a family? I mean, there's lots of other outside resources that we've, encountered. Mm-hmm. So how important do you feel it is to find those resources?
It's the number one thing. You can't do it all on your own. Just going through the emotions is a job in itself. Mm-hmm. at all stages. I mean, here we are 4 years later, and it's still new challenges.
Always.
I mean, so much happens.
Revolving door, always.
Oh, always. But resources are so important. Finding an advocate or finding a community that can guide you through what to do, who can go to bat for you, who can go to these meetings with you. And there's so many wonderful advocates out there that this is what they do. And I know without ours, we.
Right.
God
Well,
help us all.
and you and Scott are great advocates. You know, you're such a wonderful advocate to your son, and I know because I've seen it. You know, we've
thank you.
because of our friendship.
Yeah.
But you know, you've done such wonderful things for. Did I say Ronan?
No, you said your son, Greg.
Oh, okay. My goodness. See, folks, I'm always worried I'm going to muddle up the wrong name. I'm going to say the wrong name, but no, I mean, I think that I've seen those strides that you have made with Gregor and how important that has been for you guys as a family unit. But I think that you guys, and so I always tell people, you know, we have our advocates, we thank our advocates, but you guys have been so proactive in the advocacy.
You still have to do the work.
Right.
The advocate can guide you and tell you what comes next, or the laws, the rights.
Right.
But you still have to do the work.
And you're the voice.
Yes, you're the voice.
Yeah.
And your gut is what's always right. I mean, you have to trust that.
Yeah.
That, I mean, ultimately, you know what's best for your child. You may have the diagnosis, you may have this, that, suggestions.
Right.
But the end of the day, you know what's best.
Right.
And you can't for 1 second think somebody else is going to have your kid's best needs in mind.
Right.
Because it's just, unfortunately, it's not true.
It's not true, unfortunately.
It's not, sadly, and it's tough.
So in closing, how do we continue to encourage other parents, I guess is the question I want to pose to you. But like what are those golden nuggets or those pieces of advice that you kind of give to parents to just stay strong and to find those resources?
Yeah, number one, keep going. You have to keep going. You can't ever quit fighting. Right. I mean, even in the beginning, if it seems hard or, maybe they don't need this, do not for 1 second doubt yourself. You keep going, and you have to keep fighting, whether it's a couple months, a full year like we went through. You will find someone who will listen to you and who will get your child what they need. I think this podcast is such a tremendous resource. I mean, you are so knowledgeable, and if you don't know the answer, you know somebody else who
I'll
does.
figure it out. Yep.
And I think it's such a tremendous starting point. But something that you had mentioned in the first part was about your mindset. You have to be in the right mindset that we're not going to be defeated. And my child's not going to be defined by this, defeated by this. They are a person. They're a human. They are still an 8-year-old boy. And
they're still a kid.
Yeah, they're still a kid.
Kids, yeah.
But we're going to find that support that they need. But it starts with us as parents never quitting, and you have to keep going and fighting. And
I've had, and I'm glad to hear you say that. I've had parents say to me, "Oh my gosh, I can't do what you do. I'm already so tired." I'm fucking tired too.
Yeah.
Like I'm tired too. And so people go, "Well, what do you do?" I go, "I get tired and I rest."
Yeah.
And then I get up, dust myself off, and get back in the game.
Right.
Like it's just, so I think that, and that was also from the previous episode that we had about just talking about taking that time to really give yourself that break, but be ready because it's a constantly revolving door.
Parenting's hard.
Yeah, it is hard.
I mean, we joke that 90% of the time Gregor's the easy one. Ronan, he's our tricky one. But
That's so
it's
funny.
It's
You just got to do the best that you can.
You just got to keep going.
Yeah.
And it's worth it.
Yeah.
They're worth it. And we can all do it.
Yeah.
We can all do it.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for being here and
thank you for having
sharing
me.
your experiences with all of our listeners.
Yes.
And I think that it's such valuable information that you offer. And I think that I've seen so much growth in you as a person.
Thank you.
I'm so unbelievably proud of you too. I have to say that to you as your friend. I'm proud
right,
of you.
Right back at you. I mean, because of you, I feel like I do have the strength and the perseverance to really just keep pushing,
To keep going.
pushing, keep
Yeah.
fighting. And I'm happy to talk with anyone, to share our story. I think
Yeah.
this podcast is just tremendous, what you're
You
doing.
got to find those cheerleaders, folks.
Yep.
Find those cheerleaders. But
That's right.
Well, this concludes our episode for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please like and follow us on Facebook and Instagram. And if you'd like to, also subscribe to our YouTube channel at Pieces for My Puzzle. If you like what you're hearing, please spread the word to the autism community, or maybe even a friend or family member that you think might need help and support. We want to definitely be able to offer guidance and hope to all of our listeners. And if you like what you're hearing, please give us a good rating on your preferred podcast platform of choice that you use. Thank you again so much for tuning in. And until next time, keep working on your puzzle. And remember, it doesn't have to all be solved in a day. Take care.